What's up, everybody, and welcome to Dad's Parenting Boldly podcast. I'm your host, Carl Aline, and today's interview is sponsored by Dance Where You Are Youth online dance classes, helping dads to keep their kids active, taking online dance classes. Check us out at dancewhereyouareyouth.net. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the subscriber button. Episode 12, How to Communicate with Your Kid in a Healthy Manner. Hope you enjoy. What's going on? What's going on? All right, we are with Mike Hunt. Mike the Man Hunt. Mike is a great friend of mine. We've been friends for how long have we been friends for, Mike?
Oh, man, I would say probably maybe 22, 23 years. It's a while back.
Yeah. 23 years, about 23 years, 20, maybe 24 years. Oh, my gosh. And, wanted to get on here and reconnect with my man, Mike, great friend of mine. Just great friends, man. Loves his son. We both have boys the same age, and we're going to dive a little more back into that. But how you doing? How you doing, Mike?
Bro, I'm blessed, man. I am so blessed. And I think considering everything that's happening in the world with the pandemic and just everything, I could not complain. I choose to be happy. And I thank God for my health and everything that's a blessing in my life right now. So I'm good. I'm good.
Amen to that. Amen to that, my brother. Well, hey, we're going to dive right in. So Dad's Parenting Boldy, this is our podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? What do you do? A little bit about you and your son.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's a lot there. Okay. So just a little bit
about Mike.
Okay. So I was born in Massachusetts, and I was raised in Georgia, and I spent an equal amount of time, in both places. And I've been residing in Canada since 2007. Currently, I work as a vocational rehabilitation specialist for the March of Dimes Canada, supporting people with disabilities to find careers, and those who've acquired disabilities perhaps throughout their life to help them do a career transition. So that's sort of what I do as a career in short. In terms of my son, he's a very rambunctious 6-year-old, very opinionated and expressive, but he's a good kid, listens, very conscientious. I'm really amazed at the maturity he has at 6 years old. So yeah, I love him to bits. Love him to pieces.
That's awesome, man. That is fantastic. And, like I mentioned, this is Dad Parenting Boldy. I'm just adjusting something real quick. Dad Parenting Boldy podcast. This is all about fatherhood and just helping dads to really connect emotionally with their sons and just not just that, but just also pursue our passions and be passionate people. Oh, a sidebar. You also have a background as far as being athletic too, right?
It almost feels like a lifetime ago, but yeah. So I did competitive wrestling in high school and in college, and did pretty well with it.
Nice.
That's all I can really say about that. But yeah, I still, even now, being middle age, I still look for competitions that are age appropriate for me, but not much happening right now with the pandemic. But yeah, I got a bit of an amateur wrestling background.
That's cool. That always inspired me about you, man. Yeah. You just always kept yourself and seemed like you kept yourself in shape and
trying to, man. Pandemic weight makes it hard, but yeah.
I know, right? And there we go. Watch the stomach.
That's right. That's right.
Well, let's dive right in. We're talking about just parenthood and one thing that really stood out to me, and just you're part of our Facebook group, Dad's Parenting Boldy, and I like to just go out and ask questions to the dads. It's just to kind of see open-ended questions to see where the dads are at, and it definitely intrigued me with the answers that you give, and you seem to be one who's all striving to get better. But what I noticed was you have this thing with your son where you're communicating with him and you treat him with a certain respect where you say, hey, this is what I would say, or this is what I say, hey, I make mistakes, but you talk about your conversation with them, and it's very respectful towards your son. And I was just impressed by that. So I thought I'd ask you some questions when it comes to communicating with your child. Yeah. So So what do you think the first step is when it comes to parenting and communicating with your child? The importance of it.
Yeah, I think granted, we're all different, and our kids are different, right? And so, um, the way I communicate with my son, the way I connect with them may not work for some people's kids and their relationship or that dynamic. But my son has the personality where he's really big on words and he's really big on connection. So eye contact, getting down to his level. Um, for him, that really means a lot. And whatever I have to say when I'm engaging him in that manner, it resonates. I know of people who, they may have to raise their voice, and I'm not saying I don't have to do that, on occasion, but by and large, my communication with them is very conversational. Even when I'm disciplining, it's very conversational. But I want to, the way I communicate, I try to do it purposeful because, I find that, our kids are very intuitive. They can read us better than we would probably give them credit for. You have a handful of kids, so I'm sure you can attest to that. But yeah, and so for me, what's important is I want my son to know when daddy is being assertive, when daddy is serious, when daddy's joking, and when daddy's just trying to connect. And so I want those lines of communication to be clearly distinguished, because for him, it's going to help him to not only understand how I communicate with him, but it's going to actually help to socialize him because he's an only child. And so, for kids that have siblings, the whole socialization process is elevated a bit. But for an only child, all they really have is mommy and daddy, and of course, their peers at school or whatever. But that whole socialization process for an only child, you have to almost take it to another level so that they don't grow up being socially awkward or just feeling uncomfortable for something that would be considered easy communication. So I guess to get back to your question, I just try to be very purposeful in the way I communicate. And there's information out there too, Carl, that says that I think 75 to 80% of communication is nonverbal. So for most people, we think that communication is verbal, but we are spending more time looking at people's body language, looking at their facial expressions, looking at their body language, like all that stuff, as a part of that communication. So I want to help to distinguish that for him at a very young age, if at all possible. So.
That's powerful. I love, that's when you said that, just even being purposeful with how you communicate. And, that's true. Yeah. More than 75, 80% is more so body language and less of what you say. Mm-hmm. And, when you said that, one thing I thought about too was like, hey, when we're in our everyday lives, like with work and other things like that outside of the house, for some of us, we might think about that, but being inside of the house, sometimes I know even for me, it's easy to let my guard down and to just forget about that, because I want to veg out and relax and chill. But even what you mentioned that with your son and him being an only child, that's powerful. That's very, very intuitive of you. Like for you, when did you first realize you needed to do that? Was it just mentorship or just when he was first born or later on? Or
that's a good question. I think it was one of those things that I caught on to early in his early after he was born. I would love to take credit for preparing for him as he was born to say, this is what I'm going to do. But no, it's just one of those things that I feel God revealed to me in how I communicate. It's strange though, because like my son, I mentioned earlier that he's very conscientious. And so there are times where I would observe him. He doesn't know that I'm looking at him.
Yeah.
And I would just notice that he's very cautious, like, crawling to the edge of the bed. For a lot of kids, their curiosity would probably cause them to tumble over. For him, he stayed away from the edge. To my embarrassment, there were times where I left even sharp objects around, just being completely unaware. and he would look at it and, he would not touch it. Like he kind of already had this sort of, I don't know, this sort of inner warning system that kind of alerted him to things that were dangerous. Like it's just strange how it worked. But when I started observing a lot of these characteristics in him, I just felt like, maybe I should take on the same tone with my communication. And before I know it, it caught fire. And I just saw that it resonated with them. I can honestly say I don't have to raise my voice that often. The only time I really raise my voice at him is when he's about to do something I believe is dangerous that he's not aware of, or if I feel as though he's not listening. And even when I say raise my voice, I'm not talking about yelling, but I'm just talking about having an assertive tone where he knows that, okay, daddy is serious, So, but yeah, it was something that naturally meshed with his personality and how I began to communicate with him. And before I knew it, it was a thing. So yeah.
That's powerful. That's a tool, man. Me listening to it. I'm like, I need to do that with all of my kids, and all the kids that they're speaking to them, and the way I speak to them will be very, very different. But being alert with that is super important, especially being in the home. Right. I realized that, hey, doing that at home, that could someone even help energize you for other areas of your life as well. As far as just being aware of the roles you need to have. And even when you mentioned, the different ways, like being assertive and the other ways, as far as the way you speak and being aware of that, it's like my background is dancing. So it's like a community. So I'll use my term. It's like a continual dance you kind of got to have in your communication. And especially since, as far as our communication is more than 75%, 80%, body language,
nonverbal, yeah,
nonverbal, I should say. Sorry, man, that's that just speaks so loud to me. You know what I mean? So yeah, so no, I appreciate that. That's awesome. What would you say is a second step that dads will need to take as far as parenting with communicating with your child and communicating well?
Yeah, I think transparency. And what I mean by that is, I think, Carl, you and I are roughly in the same age range, same age demographic. And we grew up in a generation where our parents was very much like, do as I say, don't do as I do. When I tell you to do something, no questions asked, you do it, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
But I think if I can turn that on its head a bit, I think just transparency in terms of making ourselves approachable for our kids to ask us why certain things are the way they are, why they should do what daddy says, and not taking that as like as defiance or anything like that, but just being able to see it more as a learning and a teaching opportunity for you and a learning opportunity for them. Because again, when kids grow up and, they're constantly being told what to do, but never given the reason behind it. There is statistics and studies out there that suggest that the kids who don't have, those kind of questions answered and that inquisitive mind satisfied, they grow up being people pleasers. They grow up just following and not leading. Somebody says 2 + 2 is 5. They don't challenge it. That's a bit of an extreme example, but that's my point, because they're conditioned to just do as somebody says and not challenge or question it. So I want to be able to, so for me as a father, I want to be able to establish the dynamic between my son asking a question because he's really just genuinely trying to learn. It's not a defiant spirit, versus him asking a question because it is a defiant spirit, but understanding that, but keeping the tone very conversational and not allowing that to get to you. So I think for dads, allowing communication to be a two-way street. And again, we're not talking about a child that's being disrespectful or anything like that. And even if they are, having the patience to figure out where's that coming from? Where's the root of that? But having that two-way communication with your kids and allowing them to question things, because when you answer those questions, they grow up, become adults that learn how to question things that could save them from things that could potentially harm them or even compromise their sense of morality. So, yeah, that's the second thing I would say.
Man, that's powerful, man. That's challenging, man. That's probably one of the biggest challenges for dads.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm kind of letting myself in there as well. Because this is like, how do you, and you said it too, like, how do you differentiate when a child is, kids, they're curious, they really want to know, they really want to learn. And the other side is just like, I don't feel like doing it. Why?
Right.
You know?
And that's defiance. And it's important to distinguish that. So as you give that as an example, that is an example of defiance. But a kid that just says, okay, daddy, but why should I not put my hand on the stove? Okay, let me tell you why not. Oh, because you hurt yourself, you burn yourself, and then there's some things that sorry, I don't mean to cut you there, but there's some things too that even as I tell my son, his 6-year-old mind can't understand and comprehend, no matter how much I try to explain it to him. And so there are times where I just have to tell my son, Lavelle, I'm gonna need you to trust daddy. Do you trust daddy? Yes. Okay, buddy, I need you to trust daddy right now, because if I try to explain it to you, you probably won't understand it. But I want you to trust that daddy has your best intention in mind. And usually for him, he's like, okay, you know what I mean? So there's layers to it. And I might have come across as oversimplifying that process, but there's definitely layers to it for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. But even when you said, hey, sometimes, and honestly, sometimes there's not enough time to explain why. When with the hustle and bustle of the day, or if you got to go to a certain event or whatever with your child or your kid, there's not enough time. But what the way you explain not having enough time or not being able to explain all of it right there, that's powerful too, because it's like you're not explaining why, but you're still extending that dialogue to say, you know what, I can't explain why right now, but I need you to trust me. Do you trust me? And you come back with your child with another question or with a question, and that's like going the extra mile with dialogue. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I try to, and again, it's a lot easier when you have one child versus when you have the Aline tribe like yourself. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. I mean, I have certain liberties because I only have one son, right? So,
but it's good. That says a lot. I mean, I know for me, even me doing this dad parenting boldly, this is a chance to help other dads out. But for me, it helps me to level up in so many different ways. So one of the areas I try to level up is in my communication. I'm always exploring. I'm always just exploring. Hey, how can I do this? Or what's the best way to do this? And I do read. I read books. But also, I'm also realizing that, okay, when my boots are to the ground, this is when it most counts, because I'm gonna learn here. I'm learning hands-on with my kids, So for me, I'm excited about, even from what you said, just exploring that and having the back and forth dialogue, because I know at the end of the day, it means so much to me, but it also means it means so much more to them. Because there's just like even us talking right now and having dialogue, like we're going to different levels, and we're going to whole new levels in our just exploring this particular topic, and just for me, not taking for granted the simple communication with my child. I got 5. Everyone's different, and and hey, on my worst day, I just need to take a nap sometimes, or whatever. But and the harder things, just me striving to be the best I can be. I can have that in the back of my mind. Okay, this is how I could try to approach this conversation with my daughter or my oldest child or my youngest one. So I love what you're talking about here, and it's really helpful. And me, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is, just going that extra mile, being willing to explore and go the extra mile with your kid, and to explore that topic of dialogue, that topic of communication. And that's not easy for us as men, for some of us as men, for a lot of us as men, but it's definitely possible,
Absolutely, for sure.
So do you now I'm curious, do you think about any references? Is it mentorships or any particular books or tools that you go to as far as communication? um
Yeah, I mean, the number one for me obviously is the Bible. So
right,
for me, that's the foundational point for everything. Everything comes from that.
right.
Obviously, there's mentorship. I have a lot of men and women in my life that I trust, that I admire. I admire what they've done with their families, and so I'll oftentimes just say, hey, could you give me some advice on this particular topic that's very difficult for me to communicate with my son, or can you think of some ways I can teach my son how to aim in the toilet bowl when he's learning how to stand up and pee, just different things like that, right? But mentorship in general is really key. As the old adage says, it takes a village to raise a child. That's not just for kids too. That's for parents. It takes a village to raise the parents too, especially when you're new to parenthood. So yeah. So the Bible, and I have a few books here that I would, if you don't mind, I would
Oh
just
yeah.
sort of jump to. Yeah. So there's one called Faith Begins at Home, Dad, and it's by Mark Holman. This is a really good one. I'm not sure if this is coming up backwards on your end, but it's a small little paperback, but very helpful resource.
Nice.
One of my absolute favorites, and I think I quoted this book in the Facebook group, but it's Better Dads, Stronger Sons.
I
This
remember.
is a this is a very, very good book in terms of character, how to help your sons build character, and it all starts from dads and modeling it. So again, going back to the era that you and I grew up in, we may not have always been in situations where our parents were modeling the behaviors that they wanted us to have, but this book is reinforcing why it's so important for fathers to model that behavior for their kids. So and this one's amazing. This is Four Pillars of a Man's Heart by Stu Weber. Amazing book. It talks about the four pillars of in a man's life, and the four pillars are basically king, warrior, mentor, and friend. And it talks about how usually a man is in crisis when one or more of those four pillars are not erect, if that makes sense. If it's not standing firm, or if it doesn't have a firm foundation in that man's heart or in his life. So usually when you find a man that's sort of struggling with direction, and I know a lot of your podcasts and your subject matters are talking about passions and things like that, the Four Pillars of a Man's Heart is a really good resource. If you find a man that's having difficulty trying to figure out what their passions are, then chances are one of those four pillars are probably not in place the way they should be, and that's an area that should be explored. So these are the three books I would go to, or I would suggest if someone wants to really look at how to be the best father they can be. Obviously, they're all faith-based approach, and maybe some of your listeners are more looking for secular resources. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of those, but these three books, in addition to the Bible, have really helped me in terms of my fatherhood. So, yeah.
Nice. No, that's good. I say my motto is, hey, my motto is principles. Give me some good, strong principles. Hey,
Right.
that's gonna help. And dads, we
Yeah.
gotta get that help, dads. We gotta be the best we can be. That's what we're about. So, man, I appreciate you referencing those books, and we'll have them in the notes as well. So,
Okay, sure. Great.
for sure. And also, hey, is there a third step you think dads can take with parenting and communicating with their kids?
I would say the third and probably the most important, arguably the most important, is be gracious. Be gracious with yourself, because none of us is perfect. We're going to make mistakes along the way. We might have those moments where we accidentally, snap, or we're short with our kids. Those days come, they're going to happen. The goal is to try to figure out what the source of why those occurrences are happening, but be very gracious with yourself. Kids are very, very forgiving, and I think sometimes kids don't realize sometimes when you are having a bad day. I know I mentioned earlier that kids are intuitive, but sometimes kids don't know that you're having a bad day until you communicate, until you open your mouth, right? And so if and when those times do happen where you say something you shouldn't say, or the tone wasn't right, something comes across unloving, I would just say, just be very gracious with yourself, and be gracious with your kids too. My 6-year-old son, I'm still trying to teach him how to say please, and he's getting better at thank you. But when he asks for something, it sounds like a demand. I want a popsicle, something like that, right? And I have to, again, in patience, teach him. Okay, is that how you ask, son? Oh, sorry, Dad. What I meant was, can I please? So no one has it. No one communicates perfectly all the time.
Right.
And just being very gracious with yourself and allowing yourself to grow into the role of a father. So, yeah, so that's what I would say.
Good stuff. Wow. Being gracious, one thing as I'm doing this journey, and that's one of the key things that's important for us as dads, just being, and I love that you said that, being gracious with ourselves, and yeah, we're gonna make mistakes. I know I make mistakes with my kids, and the second thing you talked about, just being, transparent and vulnerable. Hey, guys, I'm trying my best. I had a hard day today, and the way I communicated to you was it was harsh, so my bad about that. I'm so sorry, and that's powerful, because even those two things right there teaches their kids so much. And you talk about modeling, they get to see your example, and it does so much for them. And it breaks down the wall. Sometimes if there's a wall of stress, or a wall of just tension that you just can't articulate, neither of you, it just shuts it down. So what you mentioned right there, being gracious, is powerful. That deserves to be explored a lot more. And I know for me, I plan to explore it a lot more, because when you're not gracious toward yourself, you could end up being the other way and just being more hostile or frustrated, and it doesn't help out the environment, with you and your kids, so that's powerful, man. Being gracious, man. I agree with you 100%.
And I'll even, what, Carl, I'll even take it a step further. If you don't learn to be gracious with yourself, it's going to be hard for you to be gracious with your kids, especially when they get older and they get, a little bit more independent, especially in those teen years when they're navigating, all those difficult life choices, even some of those choices that may impact their future. It's going to be really hard to be gracious with them if you haven't learned to be gracious with yourself. So, but yeah.
That's, man, that's some good stuff. Those are some value bombs right there, my brother. Value bombs.
Value bombs.
Value bombs. Well, man, this is good stuff. Is there anything else you like to tell our community about just communicating and parenting? Anything you like to communicate?
I guess just one last thing would just simply be, as we talked about earlier, and I just want to reinforce this, it's just being vulnerable with your kids when you make a mistake, just apologizing. Like the way you illustrated that just now about how you tell your kids, I had a rough day or whatever, that is so powerful to a child. And I'm not speaking as though my 6-year-old son knows that. I'm speaking more as a person, who had a father that struggled with addiction and different things like that. And I'd look back in hindsight and I realized, what, if my dad was a lot more vulnerable with some of the things he was feeling and dealing with, I think he would have been surprised at the response I gave him. But again, my dad grew up in that they grew up in the baby boomer era, and in the South, Jim Crow laws, and so drug addiction, alcoholism was how they medicated, to deal with difficult times, and so. But again, it wasn't until like really recently that I was able to put that together. Like, not that I'm justifying his decision to abuse drugs or alcohol, but I can understand on the level of just being a man and a human being. Okay, you and I, Carl, we have like a plethora of resources available to us to help us being better fathers. I mean, hence this podcast. And our kids are going to have, like, I don't know, an astronomical amount of resources when they become fathers. But my dad, growing up in the South under Jim Crow laws, segregation laws, they didn't have those resources. And if they did, they weren't really available to people of color. So I understand now, and I think just, if had I known that as a teenager, I think I would have been a lot more gracious towards my dad as I got older. And I don't have any issues with my dad now. Him and I have a great relationship. We were able to even have these conversations now. But, I even had to tell him, Dad, I think, if I had known that this is what you was going through, I would have loved to just have known it and just, been a great support to you, as much as I could being a teenager. So, but that's what I would tell our community of fathers and men out there. Just be vulnerable, and it's okay to apologize to your kid. And it's okay for them to see that you are not perfect, that you have your weaknesses. Because, as the word of God says, where you're weak is where you're strong. Your kids will see your strength and your weakness. But a person that tries to pretend to be strong all the time, as the kids get older, they're going to see their weaknesses and even see that mindset is a weakness in of itself. So that's what I would say.
Right on, brother. Right on. Being vulnerable, man. Well, Mike, thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this podcast. It was a pleasure having you, my friend. And
thanks for having me, Carl. I appreciate it. Yeah,
dude, totally great reconnecting with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks. I appreciate everything you're doing, and I appreciate this platform that you've created for us fathers and us men. And so you totally have my support, as I've told you before, off the record, but now on record, you have my support, and anything I can do to help support this platform, this medium, let me know. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
There you have it. Thank you to all of our audience for joining us for this amazing episode about parenting to help you navigate through your own personal journey. I'd like to invite you to check out Dad's Parenting Boldy Facebook group today for more on how you can succeed with parenting and win with dad parenting. Check us out, and we will see you on the next episode.